Hello everyone and welcome back to another deck guide, this time featuring the newly supported Fiends of French Cuisine, the Nouvelles, and the Deities of Doctrine, the Dogmatika. So this is two ritual archetypes that are tied together by a plethora of generic ritual support, as well as the fact that they both disrupt the opponent in odd but powerful ways, and the fact that we have a ton of searchers to get to our individual ritual pieces. So, if tributing all of the opponent's monsters and ripping apart their extra deck sounds fun to you, let's get started. So you've probably already noticed a couple of weird things about the deck. For one, we've got a lot of 1-ofs and a lot of 3-ofs. So, as a ritual archetype, we have a plethora of searchers to get to all of our various pieces that we need, but we also have a lot of bricks that you don't want to open. So we place 60 to maximize out on, I believe it's 26 total searchers for various parts of the deck, while simultaneously not hopefully opening just a bunch of Nouvelle ritual monsters and, say, a Dogmatikamatrix, and our hand does nothing. The other weird thing is that because we have so much engine, we don't play a whole lot of non-engine, so I maxed out on stuff that is good both going first and going second, with the exception of Fulos, which is just really good going first, because the deck is actually very good at doing both. We gain a bunch of extra effects in both Dogmatika and Nouvelle by going second and having the opponent have a monster on their board when we start to combo, so we don't mind going second, and so we like having things like Droplet where we can use it going second to negate a bunch of stuff, or we can set it going first as an extra disruption, because we do tend to end with a good number of cards left in hand as well to just pitch to Droplet. And then lastly, before we get into the actual Nouvelle engine, I want to apologize in advance. I do not speak French, so if you do, I'm probably going to butcher a bunch of pronunciation, and I do apologize, but oh well. So for our actual Nouvelle engine, the first new card is Chef des Nouvelles, which is a pendulum monster, just like the other main deck, which is Poissonnier des Nouvelles. The rest of the entire archetype is ritual monsters. These are the only two that aren't, and Chef allows you to search any of the ritual Nouvelle cards. You cannot search Poissonnier, and you cannot search any of the recipe cards, because this is kind of two archetypes slapped together. There's the recipe half, which some parts of the deck search, and then there's the Nouvelle half itself, which some parts of the deck search. There's a couple that can search either, but just be aware, Chef des Nouvelles gets you the Nouvelle half. It can also target cards on the field to modulate levels, which is important because most of our Nouvelle ritual monsters have effects when they or another card on the field is targeted. So this just allows us to quick effect activate those. And then it can also, if your opponent special summons a monster during their turn, you can banish one of our ritual cards to ritual summon on their turn. And that's pretty cool because it's just extra extension. If you leave him on the board, we play him at 3 because he is a searcher for part of the deck, and we don't mind having him be on the board as a piece. The number, I'm not 100% sure is correct on a lot of this deck, if I'm being completely honest, but I've been trying Chef at 3 and it seems pretty good. And then our next card is Poissonnier. So Poissonnier, similarly, it searches either a level 1 ritual monster or the recipe half of the deck. The important thing is that she allows you to kind of combo off and climb through the ritual ranks on your turn. So searching her is relatively important to the deck's overall game plan. You can play without her, but she is quite good. I think it might be better to play her at 2 or even 3, but I've been playing with 1, and she's quite searchable, so it hasn't bugged me too much. Then we're playing 2 Buerillabaisse. So Buerillabaisse is the most important ritual monster, arguably, because it is our level 1, so it is searchable off of Poissonnier, and it also is mentioned in the name of one of our ritual cards, which makes it searchable by 6 cards in this deck, and then it can ladder climb, kind of like a link climbing deck would do, up into the higher ritual monsters. So Buerillabaisse, for its part, when summoned, allows you to excavate the top 5 and add a Nouvelle card. It whiffs pretty often, and even when it hits, it's not normally the important part of the deck, so that doesn't, in practice, that is not as good as it reads. But if this card is targeted for an attack or an effect, which both of our pendulums can do, you can tribute it and an attack position monster to summon a higher level Nouvelle ritual monster. So that means if your opponent went first and they already have a board, you contribute their stuff, or you contribute extras of our stuff. We have ways to put things on the field to tribute, so that lets you climb into the higher ones. Conferus, as our second ritual monster, is similar, except it pops a spell or trap when it enters the field instead of excavating, and then same thing, if it gets targeted, you can switch it out for a higher level one. So the higher level one we're going into off of either of these is Peltis, the Nouvelle. So Peltis allows you to draw a card when it's summoned, and then if anything on the field gets targeted, you contribute one Nouvelle you have and one attack position monster. So a little bit better because each of these have to be targeted themselves, whereas Peltis is anything gets targeted, allows you to tribute two things, to summon specifically Balamuné. So Balamuné, when summoned, allows you to add either a Nouvelle or a recipe, which is a godsend because it is one of very few cards that actually searches either part of the engine. So you add a card, and then you can target an attack position monster your opponent controls, tribute it, and then special summon a level 6 Nouvelle ritual from your hand or deck. This is a quick effect if you summoned it off of the effect of Peltis. So you link climb through Buerillabaisse into Peltis into Balamuné, and then you contribute something as a quick effect to summon Baelgrill. So Baelgrill is kind of cracked, and this is our big payoff for the deck, because when this card is special summoned, not even just ritual summoned, special summoned, you can negate the effects of all face-up cards your opponent controls, and not just monsters, so that includes field spells and face-up traps and things like that. And then if it was special summoned by the effect of a Nouvelle, which is always going to be Balamuné, then you can tribute every card they control. Very, very powerful effect, and that's not even it, because once it's on the field, you can, same thing, target and tribute an opponent's monster or any face-up monster in attack position to special summon Angry Burger from deck. Angry Burger, we're almost never going to actually ritual summon it itself, but when you ritual summon it off of Baelgrill, allows you to then use its own effect to tribute an opponent's monster to summon Hungry Burger, the original OG Hungry Burger. So it's kind of this chain where on the opponent's turn, if you can get to a Balamuné on your turn, you can tribute something, grab Baelgrill, tribute everything, grab Angry Burger, tribute something, grab Hungry Burger. It's just so much disruption off of one card on the field. It's really cool. Angry Burger also has another effect that makes him a 2 of instead of, like most of our other rituals, we only want to play at 1, because you can reveal it in hand, add a Nouvelle, which is going to be one of our little guys most of the time, to hand, and then shuffle it back in, which is pretty cool. The only downside is that because it's always treated as Hungry Burger, we can't play 3 Angry Burgers, we have to play 2 Angry Burgers and 1 Hungry, because its tribute effect does not work if you don't have original Hungry Burger. It's kind of funny. So that's kind of how the Nouvelles is going. How are we getting there? So we have Vichy la Carte, which is basically pre-prep of rights specifically for Nouvelle. So you reveal 2 Nouvelles with different names in your deck, your opponent chooses one for you to add to hand, and then you can add a recipe based on what type it is. So everything is either a warrior or a beast warrior. So we are almost always going to reveal a Buerillabaisse and a Peltis. Those are both beast warriors, which gets you Recette des Poisons, and then you can do ritual stuff from there. So pre-prep, just archetypal, it's pretty cool. And it doesn't really matter which one the opponent gives you. We like Buerillabaisse best, I would argue, but like Peltis is perfectly fine for a place to start as well. Then we've got our 2 ritual spells, which is Recette des Viands and Recette des Poissons. So these are traditional ritual spells in that you're tributing from hand or field to special summon from hand, and each one has a bonus effect if you summon the right monster with it. So if you use Recette des Poissons, you summon Buerillabaisse, then you can add the other one, you can add Recette des Viands to hand, which is pretty cool. And then if you special summon Conferus with Recette des Viands, you can change all of your opponent's defense position monsters to attack, which is cool because they have to be an attack for most of our tribute effects. Really, these are just very searchable ritual spells, so we just play one of each. Then we're playing one of our other new card, which is Nouvelle Recipe Book. So this is kind of weird. It is searchable by any of the recipe stuff or any of the Nouvelle stuff, and it doesn't do anything on its own. It is an extender if you can search it because you don't need to search something else. It is quite good. and we don't mind opening it as long as we can still get to a ritual summon. Because if you have a Nouvelle monster card and this is on the field, all face-up monsters your opponent controls are automatically changed to attack position as a state action, just as a static action. So they don't get to respond to that, everything just goes into attack, which allows us to tribute and attack and blah blah blah, which is cool. And then every time a monster is tributed by a ritual monster's effect, your opponent pays 800 life. So we go through like 4 tributes on the opponent's turn, so that's almost half of their life on that alone, which is, again, pretty cool. And then once per turn, if you special summon a ritual monster, you can target one of them, which activates its targeting effects, and then add a recipe or a Nouvelle from deck to hand, except a continuous spell, so not itself, but anything else in the archetype, which is pretty dope. And then that modulates the monster's level, which doesn't really matter. So just very good extension, it's searchable. I don't want to play it at 3 just because it doesn't do anything on its own, and we have enough cards in this deck that already don't do enough on their own. But it is a good option to be able to search if you don't need to grab something else specifically. Then we play 3 Concours de Cuisine, which is probably one of our best cards, one of our best starters for sure, because it allows you to choose a Nouvelle Pendulum from your deck and a Pâtissier from your extra deck, there is only one, and summon one to each side of the field. So you're going to grab for yourself the Poissonnier, and you give the opponent Pâtissier Covocher, which is basically a useless card, but the point is that then you have Poissonnier on the field, it was special summon, its effect triggers, blah blah blah, and the opponent has something in attack position for you to tribute as you go through your effects. The other effect this has is you can banish it from graveyard to target a monster and give it a bunch of attack. Not super relevant, but it targets, which means that it is part of combos that we can do to chain up through our various ritual monsters, which is cool. And the nice thing is that this is a quick play spell, so you can activate it during your draw step, which lets you summon Poissonnier, and then Poissonnier triggers to add a card to hand during draw step where you can't be drolled. So your first search, if you open Concours, is protected from droll, which is quite cool. Then we play one of Nouvelles Restaurant à Table, because when this card is activated, you can add a recipe card from deck or graveyard to hand, which is cool, it's a searcher. But more importantly, we're searching this because once per turn, it lets you swap a ritual monster from hand to the bottom of the deck and draw a card, which just lets us get bricks out of our hand. And then another once per turn, on end phase, you can target 2 cards in your graveyard, but one has to be a recipe. Put them on the bottom of your deck, draw cards. So we have a bunch of just bonus card draw in this deck, which is really cool. So à Table lets you fix your hand and it lets you recycle our recipes. But the cool thing is that it also lets you recycle anything else. So if we, for example, want to use Entis a second time, we can put it back into our deck in preparation for doing that, which is pretty dope. The thing is that it's very searchable and then just searches another recipe anyways, so we just play it at 1. Most of the time what you're getting off à Table is going to be Chef's Special Recipe. This is a counter trap Omni Negate you can only use if you have a Nouvelle Ritual monster that negates and destroys, and then if you special summon a Hungry Burger, you can banish this to tribute all of your opponent's monsters. So you want to use this fairly early on the opponent's turn if you can, so that by the time in your chain you get to the Angry Burger or the Hungry Burger, you can then use that effect to wipe the opponent's board. It's pretty cool, and just like a very strong card that is archetype locked. So that is it for the Nouvelle cards, so let's look at what the Dogmatikas are trying to do. First up is going to be Ecclesia the Virtuous, so she can be special summoned if there is an extra deck monster on the field, so again, just a little bit of better going second-ism in the deck. And then when she is summoned by any means, either special or normal, you can search for any Dogmatika card, add it to your hand. Very simple, and she shares the text with a lot of Dogmatikas where she has some protection against the opponent's extra deck monsters. But a lot of the time you're going to be searching Dogmatika Maximus. Maximus is killer. You cannot normal summon this because it's a level 8, but you can banish any extra deck monster from your graveyard, special summon it, and then ignition speed you can activate it to send 2 cards with different names from extra deck to graveyard, and your opponent has to do the same. That means that we get 2 searches, 2 card draws, 2 destructions, 2 very good effects, while the opponent is losing precious resources. Very good, very strong card. We just have to put something in the grave to actually get there. You can also, off of Ecclesia, search Dogmatika Fleur de Lis. And Fleur de Lis, if there is an extra deck monster on the field, can special summon herself, which is cool. And then, if you have another Dogmatika when you do that, she can, as part of the summoning, negate a monster on the field until end of turn. It's an interesting effect because the opponent might have something that can respond once she hits the field, but they can't because it is part of the summon. So you can take something out before the opponent gets a chance to respond, which is quite a good effect. And then she's also good at just helping you close out games, because when she attacks, or any of your other Dogmatika monsters attack, you can activate her effect to give them all 500 attacks. So just makes your stuff bigger so you can close out games. She is also just a negate, disruption, pretty good, very searchable. Then for our actual Dogmatika ritual stuff, we play 1 White Knight, so we have 2 ritual spells that can summon either of our rituals. And for White Knight's effect, he is a level 8, so you have to use 8 stars worth of material, and then it just sits on the field looking pretty. But if the opponent uses a card or effect, any card or any effect, you can then, in a new chain, activate White Knight to send a card from your extra deck to grave, look at their extra deck, and send something to grave. So because our extra deck is largely a toolbox in this deck, we get to do draws and destructions and protections and things out of ours, while simultaneously, again, ripping them apart. So just quite good, allows you to destroy things on their turn, things like that. And then we play 1 Albazoa. Albazoa is killer, probably one of my favorite cards, because if you ritual summon Albazoa, it makes all of your Dogmatika monsters unaffected by any extra deck monster, and then you can Ignition Speed activate it. Your opponent has to apply one of 2 effects. They have to return all extra deck monsters on their field to the extra deck if they have any. If they don't have any, they can't choose that effect, which is very bad for them, because the other effect is to send half of their extra deck size worth of cards from extra deck or hand to graveyard. So if they are still at 15, they have to pick 7, because it rounds down, to send to grave from either the extra deck itself or their hand. And losing cards in hand is almost never good, so they basically just get half-size extra deck off the bat as soon as you do that, before you do any other Dogmatika stuff. It's really strong. And then he's just a 4,000 attack and defense body, which is not anything to scoff at. And so we're summoning either of these 2 with Dogmatic Calamity, which is a very strong ritual spell because it allows you to summon from your hand by using either monsters on your hand or field, which is fine, or you can send a card from extra deck to grave whose level exactly equals what you're trying to summon. So that's what we want to do with Calamity. So Albazoa is a 12, so we get to send a 12, which is going to be Lulu Lilith, and White Knight is an 8, which means we're going to send an 8, which is going to be Titaniclad. So very, very powerful ritual spell, but it does lock you out of the extra deck. Dogmatika in general locks you out of the extra deck, but we don't really use a whole ton of stuff from it. So just be aware that if you do need to do extra deck stuff with the Nouvelles, do it before you get into Dogmatika. Our other ritual is Dogmatikamatrix. So Dogmatikamatrix lets you special summon from hand or graveyard, and you have to either tribute monsters from hand or field, or banish fusion and synchros from your grave as material. So if you send, say, 2 Heralds of the Arclight searching stuff, you can then banish both of those as the material requirement for White Knight, which is pretty cool. And yeah, it also just summons from grave, which means we can tribute White Knight and then use Dogmatikamatrix to get it back anyways. So just a little bit of synergy there for the 2 decks. And then we play 3 Dogmatikamatrix. Dogmatikamatrix is a searcher for the Dogmatika stuff specifically. It is a continuous spell that when you activate it, you can add a Dogmatika ritual monster or ritual spell from deck to hand, which is cool. But if your opponent controls a monster, say if you're going second, or if you gave them a Petitiel off of your Nouvelle stuff, you can add any Dogmatika card to hand as well as the monster or spell that you've already added. So you can set up specifically like Albazoa and Calamity with 1 card if you use Dogmatikamatrix, which is dope. And then, once you've used those searched cards to summon your Albazoa, you can use its second effect to look at either player's extra deck and send one monster to the graveyard. So you can use it for your own value or to rip apart the opponent's extra deck even more. That effect is once per turn, soft. So while you can only activate one Dogmatikamatrix per turn, if you get back to a new turn and you happen to have a second, you can activate a second one and then you get 2 sends each turn. Then we play 3 Nadir's Servant. So Nadir's Servant sends a monster from extra deck to graveyard, then adds any Dogmatika monster from your deck to your hand. So this immediately sets up the summon of your Dogmatikamatrix. You send Garura, you draw a card off sending the Garura, you search the Maximus, you use Maximus, banish the Garura, and then you can send 2 more cards. The only caveat with Nadir's Servant, in addition to locking you out of the extra deck like most of Dogmatika's stuff, is that whatever you're searching has to have attack less than or equal to what you send. Thankfully, Garura is 15, which lets us grab Maximus, but if you want to send like a Herald of the Arclight, the only thing you can grab is White Knight, so just be aware of that. Then for some generic support for both sides of the deck, we play Pre-Prep of Rites. So this allows you to add a ritual spell from your deck to your hand, and then also a ritual monster that's mentioned on that spell. We have a lot of choices for that. So the Recette des Poissons mentions Buerillabaisse, so you can grab both of those. The Recette des Viands mentions Confiras, so you can grab both of those. The Dogmatika Macabre specifically mentions White Knight, so you can grab both of those. So just lots of options to get 2 cards. This deck does a lot of +1ing in the course of trying to do its game plan, which is pretty cool. So very good ritual support. Then we play 3 Diviner of the Heralds, also very good ritual support. This is going to be our best normal summon in this deck, because when normal summon you can send a fairy from deck or extra deck to the graveyard and modulate her level up by the level of what you send. So we're pretty much always sending Herald of the Arclight to search a ritual piece, and then she'll become a level 6, which you can use to tribute for any of the Nouvelles stuff, which is cool because when tributed, she special summons a fairy from deck. So that is, for some reason, Poissonnier is a fairy, so you can use Diviner, go send Herald, search any ritual piece, do a ritual summon, tribute the Diviner, summon Poissonnier to get her on your side of the field, and you're off to the races. So very good starter, probably the best one in the deck. Still not necessarily one card because you have to have one ritual piece to make it work, but very, very good. Then we play a Ken and Gen package. So Gen, if you are unaware, allows you to, when normal summoned, he lets you summon Ken to the opponent's side of the field, and then when Ken is summoned, you get to draw 2 cards. You as the opponent get to draw 2 cards and discard one, so it fixes your hand. And then we can use Gen for some extra deck funky stuff that allows us to summon Maximus as well off of them as a normal summon. So the biggest benefit to this is that by putting Ken on their field, we can then activate things like Dogmatikamatrix for full value. They have monsters that we contribute at that point. It's just very good if we're going first for forcing through the bonus value of our engines. Also, if you open the Ken, it's not necessarily dead. It'll summon Gen to their side, and that makes them discard 1 card, but we cannot do extra deck shenanigans with Ken on our field, whereas we can with Gen. So that is why we only play the 3 Gen and 1 Ken. And then, as mentioned, we have 13 spots for non-engine. We maybe should be playing like triple tax because we have Ken and Gen, which activate the triple tax, but I don't think it's necessarily worth it considering we don't see these every game. So we want just kind of some generically good stuff for either breaking boards or extra disruptions that we draw, because we do draw a lot of cards. And then this is where I'm going to mention the sideboard. It's just a bunch of generic going first and going second cards that you can modulate. Just be aware that Fuelos is useless going first, so you want to take those out and switch out for things like Ash Blossom, whereas Ken and Gen are useless going second, so you want to take those out and swap them for board breakers like Evenly and Dark Ruler. So just be aware, it's a pretty flexible non-engine suite that we have here, so you want to run a bunch of stuff for both going first and going second to kind of modulate that. So a lot of the extra deck is just stuff we want to be sending to the graveyard, like Elder Entity Natis, which when sent to the graveyard allows you to target and destroy a card on the field. Pretty cool, it's just disruption that you get to use. Coverture is useless to us for the most part, outside of the fact that you have to summon her to the opponent's field off of Concours de Cuisine. So we play one to summon to their field to give us something to tribute, which then puts her in your face-up extra deck. And then you can, like, use her to set pen scales and things. It's a little bit weird, but mostly just be aware she's here to give to the opponent to tribute. Garura's here because it draws us a card. Titaniclad is here because he can special summon or add to hand a Dogmatika card on end phase, so you can special summon Ecclesia, then Ecclesia add Fleur-de-Lis, or if you already have Ecclesia or have used her this turn, you can just add the Fleur-de-Lis to hand for the disruption. Pretty cool. Then we play 2 of Herald of the Arclight. Herald of the Arclight is a killer card that has a not once per turn. When sent to the graveyard, you can search any ritual piece, any spell, or any monster to hand. And because it's not once per turn, we can routinely send more than 1. I wouldn't mind playing 3, but we just don't really have the room. Then I play a Wind Pegasus Ad Ignister, so this is mostly to send off of Ultimate Slayer, and then if you send it off of Ultimate Slayer or anything else, we don't regularly want to send it off the Dogmatika stuff, but you can. Once it's in your graveyard, if a card you control is destroyed, you can spin one of their cards back to their deck, so it is kind of like retaliation. It's not necessarily protection, but it's an extra disruption if they get uppity. Then we play a Chaos Angel because we can sometimes, very rarely, summon it using a Diviner of the Herald and a combination of other cards. So like Petit plus a Poissonnier or a Chef plus a Poissonnier gives you a light dark Chaos Angel, which is pretty cool. It's not common that it comes up, but it is possible to do. If you have an extra Ecclesia lying around on your second turn, she's pretty easy to go with Diviner of the Herald into a Chaos Angel. Just be aware it's possible and be looking for opportunities, but don't try and do it every single game. Then we play 1 Lulu Lilith because when sent to the graveyard on end phase, it lets you special summon one of your Dogmatikas. So it's just another way we can send her to summon Albazoa, and then on end phase special summon the Ecclesia, which can search the Fleur-de-Lis. Just another way to go through the whole Dogmatika line of stuff. Then we play 1 Almirage because you can link off Gen into Almirage, and then link Almirage off into Secure Gardna. What that does is it puts Almirage in your graveyard, so that if you have Maximus, and only Maximus, or only the Ecclesia to search Maximus, you now have 1, an extra deck monster on the field, so you can special summon the Ecclesia, 2, an extra deck monster in the graveyard, so you can banish it to summon the Maximus to, you know, rip 2 cards from the extra deck and start searching and doing more stuff. So that is why we have to play these in Dogmatika decks just in general, because it turns Gen into turning on your Dogmatika engine, basically. Then we play a Dynamondo because you can make this with a ritual monster and anything else, and then on the opponent's turn you can tribute it to special summon a ritual monster. So a lot of our stuff triggers when special summon rather than when ritual summon, like Bale Grill. So if Bale Grill is special summon, it negates everything. You don't get the full tribute, but it does negate everything. So you can make Dynamondo, and then when you need to on the opponent's turn, special summon back the Bale Grill, negate their entire board. It's pretty cool. There's just some weird tricks you can do with it. I've been trying the new Ashland because it allows you to use 2 monsters to go into it. It gives all of your rituals piercing, which kind of matters a little bit because Albazoa is big, but it doesn't matter too much. The important thing is it allows you to reveal a ritual monster in hand to add a different attribute and type of ritual monster to hand. So that doesn't work great for the Nouvelles stuff, but it allows us to jump between engines. So if you have White Knight, it allows you to search Buerillabaisse, and if you have Buerillabaisse, it allows you to search White Knight. So say we have like a Buerillabaisse and a Dogmatic Calamity in hand, and those two don't necessarily work together. If we can make an Ashland, we can use the Buerillabaisse to go into the Albazoa. It hasn't been my absolute favorite card in testing, but it's okay. You could probably replace this with a 3rd copy of Herald and not miss it. Just be aware it's an option. Then I play a Faragite because she is a thing to send, and when sent, she allows you to draw a card and then put a card back in your deck. So you can send her off of Ultimate Slayer. There's not a lot of great options for links to send, and you need something to send off of Ultimate Slayer. The last Ultimate Slayer card that we have is Mariologic Aggregator, is our 1 Xyz in the extra deck, because when sent to the graveyard, it negates a card on the field, so you send it off of Ultimate Slayer to spin one of their Xyz monsters, and then you get a free negate off of it, which is cool. So, after about 10,000 years, that is going to do it on our deck profile, guys. I mentioned earlier this is not a 1-card combo deck. I will show you one 1-card combo, but the rest of them are all going to be 2 cards, so let's get into it. Alright, so for our first 1-card combo, this is going to be just Nadir's Servant. As mentioned previously, this is not a 1-card combo deck, so this one's not really going to end with much of a board. We'll have 1 disruption, but what this is going to do is churn through our deck and draw cards and search things so that we can find the pieces we need to do more. So we're going to start by activating Nadir's Servant. Nadir's Servant, send Garura to grab Maximus. Garura draws us an extra card, immediate refund. Maximus banish Garura to summon itself, and then we can send 2. You're almost always going to send Arclight to search a ritual piece. I send Titaniclad here because that lets us summon on the end phase and get 1 disruption off of this at least. So the Arclight's going to grab Angry Burger because we have nothing else. Angry Burger lets us grab Chef de Nouvelles. Chef de Nouvelles lets us grab basically anything in the Nouvelle archetype, which is going to be At Table here. At Table, activated, that lets us grab Recette de Poisson. If we have another way to find Buerillabaisse, then Poisson lets us do the Nouvelle thing. Otherwise, this is just basically going to be it. And then on the end phase, Titaniclad is going to summon Ecclesia. Ecclesia is going to search Fleur-de-Lis. So if the opponent summons an extra deck monster, then we have 1 negate in Fleur-de-Lis here. And then you can see we've already gone +2, so hopefully in the other 4 cards in our hand, we will have been able to assemble something better. Cool, cool. Alright, so starting off our 2-card combos, as I mentioned, the majority of this deck is 2 cards. We don't really do 1-card combos in this ritual archetype. A lot of ritual archetypes don't. And so we're going to be doing the Gen and Matrix just as an example combo. This is a pretty solid one. Let's go. So we normal summon Gen. Gen can summon Ken to the opponent's field. We'll draw 2, discard 1. In a perfect world, we would draw better than 2 Ultimate Slayers, but oh well. Then we can link off into Almirage, into Gardena, which puts something in the graveyard to banish for Maximus, which we can search off of Dogmatikamatrix because the opponent has a monster. And then we can use Maximus to send Titaniclad and Arclight. Arclight grabs us Albazoa, which is the second piece of the ritual puzzle. So we can send Lulualilith to summon the Albazoa. Albazoa can then make the opponent make an impossible decision, and we can use the last effect of Matrix to send 1 card from either extra deck to grave. I use Garura here, and the Garura is going to draw us a card. And then the Titaniclad in grave is going to add Fleur-de-Lis, which is immediately online because we have 2 Dogmatika bodies and an extra deck monster. But then we also sent Lulualilith, which is going to summon Ecclesia from deck and add another Matrix for next turn, because Matrix, the interesting thing is that the only once per turn on it, the only hard once per turn, is the activation. So 2 matrices lets you activate 2 matrices effects per turn, which is pretty dope. So this is a bunch of ripped stuff out of the opponent's board, and then 1 negate, and a good number of resilient bodies thanks to Albazoa's protection. Cool? Cool. So now for a more Nouvelle-focused combo. So we are going to start with Concours de Cuisine, and we're starting with Buerillabaisse, but Concours lets you search a bunch of stuff to make this whole thing work. We're actually going to start in the draw phase by activating the Concours because this protects our first search from Droll and Lockbird, which is pretty cool. We're going to summon 2 to the field. Poissonnier is going to grab us Recette de Poisson, which we can then immediately use on main phase to summon the Buerillabaisse, which will trigger Buerillabaisse to excavate 5. We hit nothing here, but hopefully you hit a better thing than us. And then Poissonnier is going to scale herself, and we can use her effect to target the Buerillabaisse, to tribute both cards on the field, to summon herself, to summon Pelti. Pelti is going to draw us a card, and then we can use the Concours' graveyard effect to target Pelti, which can then tribute both of our cards to summon Balamunet from the deck, and then Balamunet can add the at table, and then Poissonnier, not being a once per turn, can scale herself again. At table can search us Chef's Special, and we on end phase can shuffle 2 in to draw a card. So we end up +1 card in hand, which is pretty cool, but more importantly we have a counter trap, Omni Negate, which is very strong, and Balamunet can tribute something on the opponent's turn to summon our level 6. Our level 6 then negates all of their cards, spells and traps included, and then tributes their entire board, so that is a board wipe after 1 tribute. And then it can also, when they try to rebuild, tribute something else to summon Angry Burger. Angry Burger can then tribute something else to summon Hungry Burger. So that's a total of 3 single target tributes and a board wipe. And then if we use Chef's Special before we summon one of our Hungry Burger variants, we can then banish it to tribute their entire board again. So in total, 2 board wipes, an Omni Negate, and 3 tributes, which is quite a strong board for just needing to assemble 2 pieces. Cool, cool. Alright, and we're back with closing thoughts on our Nouvelles Dogmatika deck. So as for pros, this deck hits on an axis that is very powerful against most decks. By tributing monsters, that is one of the most powerful forms of removal. We tribute at effect rather than at cost, so we still don't take out towers and things, but we get around destruction protection. Most of our stuff doesn't target, so we get around targeting protection, which is quite good. And then, of course, the Dogmatika side of things is ripping the opponent's extra deck to shreds as we go, meaning that something like Malice, which can play through Banishment, doesn't really play through the tributes, and that is if they even get a chance to play, because most decks nowadays are incredibly greedy and need most, if not all, of their extra deck. If we manage to Albazoa and then take out 1 or 2 remaining core pieces with like Dogmatikamatrix and or Maximus, that will stop most decks in their tracks, which is pretty cool. As for cons, this deck, despite my best efforts, is quite bricky. So you will fairly often, much more so than I would like, draw like 3 of the Nouvelle ritual monsters and a Dogmatikamatrix with like 1 piece of interaction, and that hand does literally nothing. So it's frustrating that we can't fix it anymore, because you need all of these Nouvelles, because for the deck to function you need access to all of these targets. You could go down 1 Buerillabaisse, but I have it at 2 because we want to see it. We just can search it in many ways. That's the most important ritual to see. Conferus I debated taking out, but the problem is then we can't use Voici la carte to grab Recette Viant if we don't play Conferus. That kind of sucks, so we have to play this card that isn't terribly great in the deck because it enables other things. You could go down the recipe book because it's not part of our core combo, but sometimes we brick on like special recipe and restaurant can grab that to maybe help out. Really, it's just a problem where we don't get to play that much non-engine, and despite our plethora of searchers, I think we have 26 searchers for various parts of the deck in this deck, we can still just draw a Hungry Burger and brick. And that kind of sucks. So I don't know how much I'm going to be playing this deck after this video, mainly because my luck is trash, but if you can find a way to make the deck more consistent, or if your deck is just far better than mine, then maybe look into it, because it is fun, and it puts up powerful boards, and I like the idea of like repeatedly tributing your opponent's stuff on their turn just to get more and more stuff on your field, like you're cooking the opponent's board into your meals, which is pretty cool. It's just so inconsistent for me, man. So anyways, that is going to do it for this video, and I hope you guys liked it, and I hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.